It's news from heaven. Today, we just happen to be talking about the greatest subject that you can possibly talk about. So, understandably, I'm a little teeny bit hyped. We're looking today at how to establish communication with heaven. If you're just watching the show for the first time, hold off. But if you've watched it before, please like and subscribe right now. Just do it. Hey, leave a comment, click the bell. These are all the things that help us go forward and give you amazing topics like the one we're going to get to right now. Because the point of the show is the greatest point of any show in the world. Humility pouring through me right now. I'm just saying, I'm not hyped about this show. I'm hyped about the purpose of the show. Purpose of the material is you've got us, right? We're down here in the middle. And what I think what we learn when we really start to suffer in any way is suffering is no good. When pain and doubt and loss and everything creep into our minds, when we know what it's like to be alone and depressed and confused, you want to be able to liberate people from that. And that is exactly what communication with heaven does. So what we're hoping is we can get a way that we can find a reliable source by which we can access the truth that should disperse these mental clouds that are keeping us all down here. Can we get that in this text? I think we got a shot at it. Let's just try it out. So today, download in the description, there's actually a compilation book Swedenborg Foundation put together about the 10 Commandments, because we're going into Swedenborg's Revelation Explained, number 970, which is in that book. You can download the link in the description, and it's in the description of one of the commandments that we get this how-to with the communication with heaven thing. So go to Revelation Explained 970, and let's see how fast we can get our minds blown. As I said before, Swedenborg talking right to us, there is no communication with heaven, something's coming up, until the evil and consequent falsehood clogging up our earthly mind has been removed. Looks like your heaven pipe isn't draining. What's going on here? We got evil, we got consequent falsehood, spiritual grease, as it were, clogging up the earthly mind. We've got to remove it. Right away, we have commentary on our picture, because you could say, evil, is that really what's going on? Falsehood, is that really what's going on? Well, I can tell you one thing. All this stuff is definitely falsehood. Like, if we're all the things I quickly threw out as examples before, that things that make us afraid, things that make us despair, the idea that we're not enough, or that life is not safe, or that people are in some way our enemies, or that they are disposable compared to our whims, all that isn't true. And that all that is gaining access to us because of something that's clogging up the mind in here. Evil and falsity clogging up the mind. Okay, and I would say that there's this fascinating sort of dual dynamic. And let me adjust the camera here for a second. I'll even put my pen down, because this is, I think, the crux of the Swedenborg mental prescription. You have these two sources of unhappiness or of negative stuff in people. The one is the self-deprecation kind of thing, where if you're in the mind space and you can be just completely, I was going to say debilitated, but I think the word I'm looking for is debilitated by self-doubt. Like, your mind is telling you that whatever it is that gets you, that you have failed at something, that you will fail at something, that something is going to come get you, that you've missed out on something, whatever it is, tons of self-critique and fear, just generalized anxiety, whatever it is, it's paralyzing, drains the happiness out of your life. That's one side. It's the clouds against us. That's one side. But then on the other hand, you have our own, so it seems like the clouds are the problem. We're the victim. And then you have the other hand where we make other people the victims, right? Where we are acting out from whatever reason, and we're harming people, or you see other people harming people. You see people that have certain kinds of power using it to harm people, or you're seeing people destroy systems that are meant to provide aid. There's these two sort of things. Wow, I wish I could draw these. Okay, let's do it. You have sort of the evil of attack over here. This is the problem in us. And then you have sort of the pain that we suffer. What color would that be? The pain that we suffer in our own minds. These are connected to the same thing, because according to Swedenborg, this sort of all the negative sort of ego stuff that we have in our own minds, it creates the conditions in which it's blocking off the access to heaven. These light rays can't penetrate that, and it would be these very truths from heaven about how life really is that would disperse all these negative thoughts that we have about ourselves in the first place. Because this clog cuts us off, that makes us vulnerable to these voices from hell, which is evil and falsity, that then can get after us and tell us all kinds of things. So it's the same. It's got different parts in it, but it's essentially the same system. Are we going to have any room? We already filled up that much of that drawing. We're going to have any room by the time we get through this. Okay, so we have to remove this in order to get this communication with heaven. This falsehood is like, and okay, stop. So you know how people in the media, the national conversation, the talking heads have always been making fun of me for having this diagram where there's dark clouds and then there's a sun up here. I draw it every single episode. Why are you doing that? I didn't know about this when we started this show. This number I just saw recently for what I think is the first time. You don't have to believe me. You could say that I was faking it all, but what do I have to gain from that? Look at the way this is described. This is the ultimate vindication. This falsehood is like dark clouds lying between the sun and our eyes. This is actually a legit way that we do in every episode to picture the untruths that come into our mind, blocking off between us and the sun. That's really what it's like. Swedenborg said it, man, right there. Okay, fine. There's another metaphor for it too. Or it is like a wall. I just couldn't believe that it said it like that. I just felt like I did it. We did it. A wall that stands between the light of heaven and the light of a candle in a cell. That's a whole different image. Because it's like we're here, we're in some kind of, the prison of the mind in here. And the sun is out there and it's brilliant and it's amazing. The sun being the truth of what life actually is and God and love, everything that's good. But there's this wall here that casts us completely in shadow, and all we have in here is just one little candle by which to try to light up the dark corners. As long as we are only illuminated on the earthly plane, we are like a person shut up in that cell and seeing by candlelight. Because the earthly plane, where appearances are taken as reality, where all the desires and things of the ego that is vulnerable in the first place to all these critiques of ourself and of life, when we're only seeing by that, then we just have nothing by which to combat these falsities. The claims they make seem true. They're using our own back channels of our mind. How many arrows can I put to these? Well, I win a prize if I put enough arrows. I'm just emphasizing that this seeing by this natural light makes us vulnerable. The only thing that can really dispel all that will come in here, I know you're looking forward to when I erase all this, and it's coming. The only thing that can dispel that is this communication with heaven. Okay. Yet as soon as we have been purified of evil and the consequent falsity. So I know it's religious. It's, talking about the evil in us, but I can see that. There's ego stuff in me. I don't mind that. Evil and the consequent falsity, right? What comes after it on the earthly plane. It is like looking through windows in the wall, windows to heaven with a light of heaven shining through them. So we can get ourselves to a point where instead of just relying on this teeny little candle, this stuff is streaming in. And eventually, we're outside and we're up in a balloon or something so close to the sun that life is bright and beautiful. There, wonderful balloon. So how do you get rid of this stuff, right? If there's all this mess in here, what do we do to establish this communication with heaven? Oh yeah, right. Remove that evil. And why would you want to do it? Well, our higher mind, the spiritual mind, is opened as soon as evil has been removed. So even if it feels like our mind is this cluttered jumble, there's something else above it. And as soon as we get this stuff out of here, it opens up. The image of heaven is essentially imprinted on this mind. And the Lord flows in through our spiritual mind and makes it so we can see the light of heaven. So there, even though it can seem like we are predisposed to have all this negative stuff of both kinds, of where we're the victim, of where we're the attacker. All this stuff just seems like we're native in it. It springs in uninvited all the time. There's another mind in here. When we start to pull this back, when that evil has been removed, there's another mind. There's actually deeper within us that you didn't even know. There's this light right here. And this thing has actually got these receptors ready. It's got the image of heaven imprinted on it, which accepts directly all these truths, which are so strong that they go over top of the clouds because we're using pen and not highlighter. That's the power of it. Isn't that amazing to think it's all there, it's all ready. You just had to peel back this layer. And the Lord flows into our spiritual mind and makes it so we can see in the light of heaven. It's not that these clouds aren't there, but when you're seeing in the light of heaven, you understand that these things are relatively powerless, and that the truth, what's actually out there, is of so much more substance and permanence that this stuff ceases to matter like it used to. It's there, but we're seeing it as it really is rather than as it wants to appear. It is also through this mind that he, meaning God, reforms and ultimately regenerates us on the earthly plane, replacing falsehood with truth and evil with goodness. And if you're thinking of evil as the thing that leads to all those problems, goodness sounds really nice. I wouldn't mind at all getting that lifestyle upgrade. The Lord accomplishes this by means of spiritual love, the love of what is good and true. So God plants in us. We default towards this love of what is self-serving and ultimately appearance-based or false. Nobody needs to push us in that direction, that you naturally want to get revenge on people, that you naturally want to be considered greater than other people in whatever way. But there's this other love in it. Don't we have this good stuff in us too, where you're loving what's good and true, meaning when you see a situation and you can tell two people are having a conflict or somebody is in some kind of position of need, and you can tell what is right, what is fair is to help this person in this way. When you can just see for the sake of what is good, this is the right thing to do. We have that in us too. That is God coming through our hearts, working to dislodge this self-centered, nonsensical way of thinking that we have, where we think if it happens to me, it's bad, but if it happens to someone else, it's good, or vice versa. It doesn't make any sense. So God is coming in saying, hey, let's move that aside. Let's get you thinking what's good and true, not just so that we can say, look, you were so bad before, but because we're trying to open that spiritual mind that lets in the light of heaven. That's how we're going to free you from everything that's getting you down, from the web of the mind that keeps us all out. That's the point. That's what God is always interested in doing, not interested in keeping score. This is about freedom. It's about freeing you. That's what this whole show is always about, freeing the mind from everything that's getting at us. At this point, we are positioned midway between dual desires, wanting what is evil and wanting what is good. Have we ever had that? What's good's up here, what's evil down here. Which one are we going for? Well, sort of both. I mean, the things that I'm told are good, yeah, that stuff is cool too, but there's times when I'm just in this, or there's times when I feel like I thought I got past this, but now I can't. We're here in the middle, and you know what? That's okay. That's part of the process. When our desire for evil subsides, a desire for goodness replaces it. You're always going to want something. That's why it has to be gradual. That's why we have to live this big, long life, because you need time to have it be that you can really live off this good stuff. That's why Swedenborg says the story of the manna in the wilderness, children of Israel. They could eat it, but they couldn't only eat it. They needed the quail as well, because we can't just expect ourselves to suddenly be spiritual and you never backslide and nothing ever goes wrong. That's not how anything organic works. Everything takes time and process. Our desire for evil, and so now how? How do you establish this communication? What could it possibly be that can set us on this path? Our desire for evil only subsides when we live according to the 10 Commandments. Resisting because they are sins, the wicked acts spelled out there, and ultimately fleeing from them as something infernal. And you may say, well, I'm familiar with 10 Commandments. I don't kill anybody. I don't steal from anybody. So am I good? Check out this book, 10 Commandments, that has all the different places Swedenborg describes. It's not just those simple, relatively simple laws, don't make idols. There are internal spiritual levels to this that get into the motivations for why we're thinking things and why we're doing things. And you may say, I don't want somebody telling me how to live. That's fine. I do, in that this is the roadmap. You want to get from where we were before, where it was all jumbled, to this jumble of light, getting to heaven in there. The 10 Commandments, in the spiritual meaning, that gives you, this is how to get out. Which to me is like the most valuable thing, because after you've been rolled around in the washing machine of life enough, you just feel like, okay, what's the way? How do I get free from this? How do I get free from this stuff in my head? How do I get free from this stuff that's keeping my life in this state of flux? Oh, all the stuff in the 10 Commandments. And this resisting because they are sins, I know that word doesn't have very good PR. According to Swedenborg, it's essentially resisting doing bad things because we know it's not good, because we know it harms people, rather than because I will look bad or I just want to get this upgrade. Although that's how you start, eventually you get to the point where it's not even tempting. And that's how it is for a lot of things with us. Like, there's a lot of people who wouldn't even think, I wouldn't even want to tear this person down to feel good, right? But there's other things that we're weak on. Eventually we get to the point where I just don't, on principle, that's not even an issue. I don't want that thing. That is that evil gunk getting removed, so that then we can start to see life in the mindset of heaven. And sometimes you can get it in little spurts, here while we're on earth. In short, as long as we do not resist evil because it is a sin, our spiritual mind is closed. Meaning you have to be doing it because, or working towards doing it, because you see it as, oh, this really is the right thing to do. But the moment we resist evil as sin, our spiritual mind is opened, and with it, heaven. That sounds relatively fast. Obviously, it's not going to change like that. But as soon as in the moment we are trying to make that pushback, heaven is in there, even if we can't necessarily sense it above the noise. But that is reassuring when you're deep in the throes of life and you're feeling like, okay, I'm trying to push back against either one, like this falsity against myself or this evil and falsity against other people. It can feel like it's all in there, to know, even when we're putting up our little effort that seems to not work day after day, that is heaven getting in there and slowly prying this mind open. Once heaven is opened, and this is the reward, this is what it's all for. Once heaven is opened, we see everything in a different light, involving the church, which is the state of mind inside you, heaven, which is the state of mind that we're trying to get to, and eternal life, which is the permanence of those. That changes the way we see everything spiritual and really everything in life, because those are the mindsets that allow us to navigate the rest of our life in the right priority. While we're living in this world, we hardly notice the difference between this new light and the old, which can be, an encouraging factor or a deflating one. It could be deflating because it's like, oh, even if I put in this work and I'm making this spiritual progress, I can't really tell the difference. Okay, but the glass half full is that you may have made a lot more progress than you think. I know it can feel like at times nothing's going on. I'm putting in all this work, but I still feel like life isn't improving. It could be that we've got plenty of this new light ready to plug in the next life, that we're totally saving up, putting our money in our spiritual 401k, and then when we retire to the next life, it's going to have all this interest on it. It could be there, even when it feels like it doesn't. This is because a person in this world thinks about spiritual things from an earthly point of view, and spiritual ideas are wrapped in earthly ideas up to the point of crossing over from this earthly world into the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, they are uncovered and understood and become obvious. You could think about your mind as like having these little seeds in it. The way that we're trying our best to understand spiritual concepts, trying our best to live well, whatever it is you're trying to make progress on, it just seems like there's these little things that don't really have much purchase to them. They may seem small and relatively lifeless compared to where we want them to be. But just think about your mind as having that actually within there are these points of brilliant light in these things. And as we raise up, as we go to the next world, everything we worked on, all these things that life puts us through to have God help this little garden of the mind growing, once we're there, they erupt, and they're sending out these amazing sparkling firecrackers of wisdom and life and love and joy. That's all ready to go as we progress from this life to the next life, because even though it seems like chaos, there is a progression and something is going on, and we can be establishing communication with heaven even while we're in the world. And there's all kinds of specific information in Swedenborg's description of 10 Commandments. Check it out. That's the news from heaven. Does that give you anything? Do you like it? Like and subscribe. Leave me a comment. I want to know, does this inspire you? Was I way too excited about it in the beginning for the actual quality material? Or did you find anything in it that made your day better? Because if you did, then I was justified, because if this material can give you any kind of boost, that's the whole point. That's what all of us here at this channel are trying to do. Really, a lot of people in the human race trying to do it. It's just hard to figure out how to get into the mind and lift the clouds. Can this help? Let me know in the comments, because if it can, let's keep refining it. Let's keep getting it better. Let me know your techniques, and we'll go from there. We'll learn and get this heaven thing really flowing in, get these spiritual minds open, and diffuse the clouds. And let's see the sun peeking over them. Thanks so much for hanging out. Tons of fun for me. Hope it was fun for you too.